My husband wanted our neighbor in our bed. I invited her husband instead. So my husband Tyler had been acting weird around our neighbor Carmen for about 6 months. She was 58, supposedly divorced, living alone in the house next door. At first I didn't think much of it. Tyler would suddenly need to mow the lawn whenever she was outside gardening. He'd offer to fix her fence, clean her gutters, carry her groceries from the car. I figured he was just being a good neighbor, you know, helping out someone who lived alone. But then I started noticing he'd spend 3 hours fixing a doorknob that needed maybe 10 minutes of actual work. He'd come home from her place smelling like her perfume. He started dressing nicer just to take out the trash. One evening, Tyler sat me down at the kitchen table with this dead, serious expression on his face. He said our marriage had gotten stale after 8 years and we needed to spice things up. He'd found the perfect solution. He wanted to invite Carmen into our bedroom. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. Some weird attempt at humor, but his face didn't change. He was completely serious. He said Carmen was experienced and sophisticated and could teach us things. Then he dropped the real bomb. He'd already discussed it with her, had multiple conversations apparently. She was interested and excited. They'd talked about boundaries and dynamics and what everyone was comfortable with. My husband had been having detailed conversations with our 58-year-old neighbor about sleeping together, and this was the first I was hearing about any of it. I just sat there staring at him. He kept talking, saying I was being closed-minded, that this was a thing people did, that Carmen had experience with younger couples before. He'd been planning this for months, having coffee with her while I was at work, discussing positions and scenarios. He'd already told her I was nervous, but would come around eventually, like my consent was just a minor obstacle he needed to work around. The next afternoon, Carmen knocked on our door holding a plate of cookies. She winked at me and said Tyler mentioned I needed time to process everything. She touched my shoulder and said there was no pressure, but she was available whenever I was ready. Then she actually handed me a printed schedule showing her availability for the next month, color-coded by day and time. Like I was booking a dentist appointment. Tyler stood there behind her just beaming, so proud of himself. I asked Carmen to leave. She looked surprised, but smiled and said to call her when I changed my mind. The second she left, Tyler exploded. Said I'd embarrassed him after all the groundwork he'd laid. Groundwork. Like seducing our neighbor was a construction project requiring careful planning. He showed me the text messages between them, dozens of conversations about what they wanted to try, things they'd Googled together, items they wanted to purchase. For 2 months, my husband had been texting our neighbor about sex. That's when I did some digging. Took me about 20 minutes on social media to learn something very interesting. Carmen wasn't divorced. She was married to a man named Marco, who was a commercial pilot for a regional airline. He was gone 2 weeks out of every month flying routes up and down the East Coast. Carmen wore no ring and told everyone in the neighborhood she was single and lonely. I found Marco's profile and sent him a message saying I was his neighbor and needed to discuss something important about Carmen. He called me within an hour from a layover in Dallas. His voice sounded tired and resigned, like he already knew what I was going to say. Turns out Carmen had done this exact thing before, 4 times in 4 different neighborhoods over the past 7 years. Marco would come home from flying to discover his wife had been pursuing younger couples, making elaborate plans, crossing every possible boundary. He said this time was different though. He was flying home in 2 days and wanted to handle it directly. I told him to come to our house for dinner. Don't tell Carmen. The next evening, I told Tyler I'd changed my mind, that I'd been thinking about it and maybe I was being too uptight. He was absolutely thrilled. Immediately pulled out his phone and texted Carmen to come over tonight. She showed up 40 minutes later wearing a silk robe and carrying massage oils and wine. Tyler had already dimmed all the lights in the living room and put on music, some smooth jazz playlist he'd created specifically for this. He'd even bought new sheets earlier that day. The doorbell rang and Tyler said to ignore it. Probably just someone selling something. I said I'd ordered something special for tonight to make it perfect. Tyler's eyes lit up, thinking I'd bought toys or lingerie. I opened the front door and Marco walked in. 6'5", easily 280 pounds, still wearing his pilot uniform. He saw Carmen standing in our living room in her robe and just sighed this deep, exhausted sigh. Not again, Carmen. She dropped the wine bottle and it shattered across our hardwood floor. Tyler looked confused and asked who this man was, and I smiled and said, "This is Marco, Carmen's husband, and if we're sharing partners tonight, it's only fair he gets included too." Tyler's face went completely white.